It's like a good dog, eh? Just give her a good smack.
Give her a good smack. Good boy.
Every dad ever, when they walk into a house party and there's a dog, just
Yeah. Big, yep, good beef. Good stock.
just give her a good smack. That's what Abby needs. Just a good little
Just
smack.
a good reassuring smack.
Okay, if you are drifting and you're not upgrading one of these two options, what are you doing? We posted on Instagram and we had a debate on which one would you upgrade if you had to choose. And here we're going to argue about it. Joel, although he may not actually think that this is the better option, he's going to argue the points for the transmission being the decision. I'm going to argue the points on the quick change being that decision. And we're going to see how the cost, performance, and everything else that's affected by doing these swaps plays a role in making this decision. To begin, my argument would be that we need to put a quick change in first. That means if you have a BMW, an E46, whatever, doesn't matter the transmission, you could have a JZX with an R154, you could have a Corvette. I think your best move is to upgrade the quick change for several reasons. You're on the other side thinking that
I think the transmission for sure, to upgrade it. One, because factory synchros just definitely do not hold up to the abuse of drifting, especially if you're fighting between gears, you're going from second, third. This thing is just gonna every time reliably do it. Albeit transmissions, usually I would get 1 to 2 years, well, call 1 year out of a transmission, and it was $1,000 to $500 to just get another used one. I was always running a CD09 or the JK. I guess after 10 years, you could have bought one of these.
okay, so what does one of these cost, first of all?
So this one's 10 grand. Yours is?
This diff is 5,000. This is a 1,500 horsepower rated diff. You can get a little bit lighter duty one for 1,000 horsepower. That will cost at least 4 grand. But what we need to account for is you have a 1,000 horsepower diff. What about the axles? You need to support this horsepower and drivetrain with better axles. And your stock axles are no longer going to bolt here. So you need to add another $1,000 a piece for your axles.
Oh yeah.
And I would say the biggest issue with what you just said on the transmission side of things is that because you're stuck between second and third, that's due to your diffs ratio being limited. And then I think the reason you're blowing transmissions often would be because you're clutch kicking the wrong wheel speed. Second's too short, third's too long. This is a very common problem when it comes to, so the first thing you think of, my transmission, my synchros, everything's grinding. If it's a 350, it's a CD09. Maybe you LS swapped your 350 and you're going through your CD09 transmissions. Would a quick change resolve that problem? Now hear me out. We have sold a bunch of quick change adapters to 350Z or 370Z axles. Contrary to the most people's opinions, these axles break often with a stock diff. But here's what happens. We've sold so many of these and people stop breaking axles because when you have the perfected wheel speed, your transmission gear selection is now, I want to run third and I'll adjust my ratio in the rear to accommodate for that. That relieves the stress out of the axles and the transmission, and it puts your engine in the perfect drivetrain power band where you're not clutch kicking so much. So really, it would be weird to have a quick change in a car. But then we forgot one thing, actually. You got to modify the heck out of your subframe to put this thing.
Oh yeah, you have to cut the subframe completely apart, maybe modify the floor depending on how high it sits.
So maybe we're talking, depending on your ability, an extra 1,000 minimum for that.
For sure.
So you could be upwards of 7 to 8 grand USD to put this in, plus a drive shaft.
Yep.
Now you need a custom drive shaft going to your stock transmission, which seems like pointless to make.
You're doing that on either end. You're doing this, it's custom drive shaft. You're doing that, custom drive shaft.
That's true.
You've also got a bell housing. Maybe the bell housing doesn't exist for the engine you're using. So there is...
Yeah, now depending on if you go with a SFI rated or just a standard bell housing, you're at least, you know, you need a clutch setup, a bell housing. I'm going to say you're upwards of 13.
Another 3 on this.
13,000, and we're sitting around 8,000 if you were to account for everything. And then there's time. How much time and expertise does it take to put this into a drift car?
This is pretty much just nut and bolt, make a little transmission mount.
You need a pilot bearing, you need a throw bearing, you need a clutch and a bell housing, all of which are really available, especially when you go with a GSR, because it's a GM 26 spline everything on it is very standard components for racing. So this bolts up to most racing transmission bell housings that are available. This bolt pattern is standard on any dog box. This, however, requires quite a bit of skill if you're not buying a subframe that's already done by a company. And I believe I've seen those for around 1,500 plus. Now we sell quick change weld-in kits, but these are costing around $500, but you need to do a bunch of work in order to put it in. The easiest one being the Corvette, where this actually just bolts in. Can't talk about a Corvette because the Corvette requires both of these. If you're gonna do a front transmission setup. And pretty much for a Corvette to have a quick change, you have to do the front trans, but that's not what we're talking about. So I think that we should give ourselves a scenario and decide what we're doing. LS 350Z, we could even say a 2J or 1J 350Z. Which one are we doing and why?
I'd say this only because of my experience with a 350 with the same amount of power. I've never blown a rear diff or set of axles ever, but I've gone
rear
through,
diff
it's quite good.
quite good. Yeah.
The Nissan rear diff is pretty good. But
Now there's a
4-speed, right? To your point, the factory Nissan 6-speed is great. Lots of options, lots of variabilities.
yeah.
This, you're limited to 4 gears.
Now could I order this transmission with different ratios?
Yeah,
Maybe closer?
yeah. Or a 6, which now you've bumped up to like 15 grand for this, for a dog box. And
So the issue that I have with the transmission in a 350 with the standard diff would be because of the 4-speed. And because the standard diff is what, a 3.7 usually, or a 3.3, depends on if it's an auto or
if it's auto, 3.5 if it's manual.
3.5, right. So we are going to have a big problem with fourth gear in this thing.
Oh
Because
yeah.
this is a 1-to-1 fourth. With that diff, useless. Completely useless. You could never use it. Well, unless you were going 120 plus miles an hour drifting. You would need a 410 or
Which
even.
you could get, rare, but you could get them in the convertibles. I think it was a 3.9.
Yeah. So I have seen people do it. Someone commented on our post that they actually did it for Pro Spec. They did a dog box with a stock diff. I forget what car that was in. It might have even been a 350. But he is right. The 350 has the strongest diff and gear setup for drifting. If you are going to break anything, it is just the axle. But the cost, you're looking at 12 grand, 13 grand-ish to put this in there. I would say the biggest issue with the stock transmission paired with this is that you still have OEM style synchros, which do not like to shift while anywhere near being on power.
No.
You need to, if you want it to last, you need to fully relieve the shift before shoving it into third, whereas, man, this my 350 third was awful.
Yeah,
It
grinds.
It goes in there, but she grinds.
Not happy about it.
If you wanted to go in without grinding, you need to just sit there for a good 7 seconds before you make the shift.
Yes.
And you need to exaggerate the movement.
Yep.
Because if you do one of these, she just gets jammed
Grinds.
and stuck and grinds
Complete
and
grinds.
stuff. So you'll still have that problem. If you get this, you'll still have that issue. But then with this, let's say we're doing a 1J, makes 450 horsepower, CDO9 transmission.
Nice.
Paired with a quick change. Whichever gear goes, you can just,
Grab another one.
yeah, you can just change the ratio. So if you lose third, which is pretty common, you could just run this baby in like a 474 or like a
Right.
530. And then your fourth gear,
Moved your up one set.
yeah, you just skip third.
Third was now second,
You have-
so now you're using fourth.
You have
and
5 other gears.
Yeah.
I mean, even in FD, Ben Hobson blew 3 out of his 4 gears. I think he only had first, I think.
Oh my.
It was either, no, he had second, I think. It was one of the 2 lower ones, but they put basically like a 290 in this.
Which
And
effectively
then he
made
tried
it a
to
third.
drift. Yeah. What you're missing is the clutch is going to get fried.
Yes.
And then you're missing a lot of the pull, the torque. You don't have any torque with a 2.9.
No.
I don't know if that's what he put in it, but anyways, that was an inch. He was going against Adam LZ, so that's pretty easy to find. And then Adam crashed or something. It was bad. St. Louis. Oh yeah, it's very common. I mean, I've had fourth going, and then we've geared for third in the S14.
In
So I
this
think
transmission?
this transmission, the dog ring was popping out,
Yep.
and the only thing that goes in these is dog rings. You know, other things obviously do wear and tear, but if you had to bank on anything going, after a full season, it would just be a dog ring. It's a very cheap part. They're all the same. There's 2 of them in there, and they're super easy to swap. So like the serviceability of this is basically nothing other than some small stuff. And same thing with this. These do not break at all, but I'm still arguing I'd rather go a 6-speed CD09 with this in the back end
Yeah.
on a 350Z.
So we compromise, and you get a set of dog teeth gears for your CD09 with that.
You could.
So then
You
you're the
could.
price of this. You have this in a 6-speed, and you have that.
It really depends on what is your bottleneck. What is the
Yes.
variable of constraints for you on which one to choose? Is it money? Is it just money? Is it what's the cheapest? This is going to be cheaper, and I think this will save the most things. And then doing a transmission upgrade later is totally fine to plan for. I think you'll still have the same issues that you had prior with axles and with just drifting in general competitively. If you do this and you got your wheel speed wrong or your gearing isn't perfect, you're screwed. The only thing you can do is tire pressure, tire diameter, and alignment specs and suspension, basically, to remove or increase grip to compensate for the wrong wheel speed. And we don't want to be doing that. We want to optimize the grip and the torque and the power band of the engine. This gives you the best power band. The only way you could really play with wheel speed, other than those things I just mentioned, would be your limiter on your engine.
I think the rev limiter.
Which we do that as well. If I want to find a spot between 2 gears, I'll go from a 73 to a 7600 RPM limiter. I like to leave myself about 500 RPM to play with on the wheel speed side, because of 500 RPM translates, depending on the gear you're running, between 8 and 12 miles an hour wheel speed. So you can dance a lot with this. I feel like you're a little restricted.
So that's for fine tuning and reliability. This is more for reliability.
Exactly. So I mean, if you were happy completely with your diff setup, this would be the alternative. I think the argument is stronger for this though.
You make a valid point.
It's cheaper, and it'll save your transmission. Your transmission's working hard, and now with this, it's still working hard, just not as hard. And you arguably you need to shift a lot less, and your timing of when you're shifting, hopefully, is nowhere near within a drift. Like,
Hopefully.
when we gear up a car for a track, you really want to avoid shifting at all costs, actually. So if there was a perfect moment that you could time for, you would set up your car so that on the run-up, you're doing a first gear. For me, is always a pit gear. It's a 2.8 ratio usually. Second, third, and fourth are your pull gears. I run a 1.82 in second, and that gives me a ton of launch out of the hole, plus really good speed. I can get up to about 50 miles an hour in second. And then by the time I've got the momentum, I've got the speed, my 1.2 ratio third gear is what takes me to the corner at whatever speed I want. Third at 1.2 is going to get me up to 100 plus miles an hour. And then fourth is my
Run.
all out. You do a big clutch dump right before the corner, big flick, throw it in, fourth gear, and you're just floored. And the reason I say that is because on this transmission, your input shaft is then directly connected to your output shaft only in fourth gear. And the sequential and the Samsonis are not like that. They're always driving through a gear. But this one, the dog ring, connects the input shaft, clicks in, connects your output shaft. Now you're just running a piece of steel like this that's connected all the way through. You can't break anything. It's literally impossible to break these in fourth gear. Your synchros aren't doing any work. Your dog ring is engaged completely, and there's no gear to absorb wear or get ruined by your clutch kicks. The oil isn't even doing its
Just for
scientific stuff between the gears. It's not even doing anything. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, the squish, the oil squish.
Yeah, the things that they...
So to your point, you put that diff in a CD09, you run a CD09 geared so that you can do the same in the CD09. Fifth, I believe, is your 1-to-1. Just
Fifth,
locks
yeah.
the input to the output.
Is that how it works in that?
Same thing.
Okay. Yeah,
So
absolutely. You would definitely... I always gear my car to run the 1-to-1 ratio. So sometimes on a small track like New Jersey, for example, I'm running like a 5 something, like a 542
Yes.
to run 4th gear.
Super short rear end.
The crazy thing about doing this though is you really notice the, and this is a good point to argue actually, because I've felt it personally. When you run a 1-to-1, that means your drive shaft speed, prop speed, everything is the same as the
Matched
RPM.
engine, yeah.
So you got to imagine you're now rotating everything significantly faster, and inertia is a real thing. That rotating mass is a lot. So when you're clutching in, hand braking, and then dumping it, and everything needs to go back to 8,000 RPM, I've actually noticed quite a bit of drag, delay. Yeah, delay on throttle whenever in 4th, but the car reacts much better in 3rd because I have that torque multiplier in the transmission.
Right.
You know what I mean? So
Yep.
the drive shaft speed in 3rd is like probably high 5s, but in 4th it's 7+.
Matches, yeah.
You ever notice anything like that? I guess because you only notice it when you're gearing a car on a slow track for 4th gear, because you're only doing
Makes sense.
60 miles an hour, but you're in 4th banging limiter.
Yeah.
So the wheels are turning this fast, and the drive shaft is infinite, and the wheels only going this fast. And I've actually found that it feels weird. It feels
So
different.
you're saying it's better to have that larger difference between the wheel and...
No, I don't think
No,
it's
you
better.
like it closer.
I like it a bit closer. So 4th gear at 120 miles an hour feels totally normal.
Yeah.
I just find it feels weird when this has like a 5 point something ratio in it, and you're only doing 60 miles an hour, but you're still banging limiter, and the input speed is still 7 or 8,000 RPM.
Right.
If anyone else has ever noticed that, I don't know how many guys are gearing for 4th at 60 miles an hour, but
I've never ran higher than a 4.
it
so.
makes 1st gear completely useless, even as a pit gear.
Oh, yeah.
It's like you'll do like
Walking speed and it's red line.
Yeah, it's 1st gear is insane with that kind of ratio. So then your pit gear becomes 2nd. I don't know. It is a little bit weird. For New Jersey, if I look back at my notes, I probably ran 3rd gear actually. I'd have to check, but I wouldn't be surprised because it does feel weird when you do that. But any other scenario, I would say 60 miles an hour plus gear for your 1-to-1 gear. And if you had a Ceto 9 or an R154 or a ZF or whatever transmission you have, gearing for a 1-to-1 will save the life of your transmission.
Very true.
And you can do it with this.
Guess that's the answer. Because a lot of the OEs do it that way. They lock the input shaft to the output shaft for your fifth or fourth or 5-speed.
Yeah, and then overdrive is
the
6.
yeah.
It's probably like a 0.9 something.
0.89, 0.9, yeah.
That's all I got for you guys. It's a bit of a debate. You guys can, form your own opinions in the comments. We covered some random stuff in there, but I think overall, it's just good to have organic conversations. I didn't interject at all.
Yeah, he was going to.
Kyle, no points?
You had so many good ideas.
Dog gears are a lot faster to shift, so when you're chasing somebody and you're shifting, you can like shift super fast. When you have like a synchro trans, it's so slow. So unless
You
have a
can shift
Honda.
fast, you just wreck the synchro.
Yeah.
Yeah, with
Every
this
time you do
transmission, you don't even need the clutch to shift.
Yeah, you just grab
It's
that
kind of like
gear.
it's like a dirt bike or a motorcycle. You can just slam it in. I don't do it. I definitely prefer to still push the clutch, whether it's habit or just whatever. But the odd time that I think of it, I'm like, I'm gonna do that. It works great. Super fast.
You got to give it a good reef to do that. You can't be like soft about your
You
shifts
do
with
a
this.
slight lift on the throttle.
Yes.
Like if you really wanted to, you could have a slight electric throttle body, a little blip.
Yes. You have a
shift,
pressure sensor on the shifter, and it'll automatically.
What is it? A blip shift or something?
Yeah.
Or it'll
Well, it doesn't blip it, but it
briefly
pause.
relieve the full throttle
Yeah.
pressure so that you can bang it into gear. But like at Shannonville pulling out of the pit, I'll do a second, third, fourth pull with this and no shifting or no clutching, sorry. There's no comparison between
No.
a stock
No,
transmission and
definitely
that.
not.
So that is that worth $5,000 more? Definitely an argument.
You
Depends
don't
on
have
what
to shift. If you've got to, you don't need to worry.
If you have this, you can shift a lot less.
Yes.
You can shift, but you're still going to need to shift.
Yeah.
So yeah, I can imagine a short run up. In a 350 or whatever, in a BMW, you're first, second, and third. I don't care what quick change you have. I've done it in the wagon. That pull sucks. You got to really baby that shifter. Well, once it's in there, it's like that.
Right.
That's a ZF for you. But
If you have like a point that you want to argue like really far, you should test it because we have the wagon with the stock diff and trans. If you think that's better, put the quick change in it and see if all of your points are true.
Yeah, the main one being we blow axles multiple times per event. Now, I wish I could put this in and then just run stock axles, which maybe we can make an adapter. I don't know. I don't know the width of this relative to a
I think it's the outer
328.
cup, the wheel cup that keeps blowing, does it not? So
Yeah, but to our point,
to dialing in the
if
wheel
you had
speed.
the wheel speed correct, you wouldn't be clutch kicking third all the time. And this may save stock BMW axles, which would argue that this is the most important decision.
Be nicer
But if
on
we
your
still
drive
broke
ticket.
axles with this, then I guess my point is null and void.
Maybe change the driver mod.
That's it, guys. We'll see you on the next one where I don't know if we're going to do this again, but it just seemed like a good idea. It's a good debate. Also, for all of you guys listening, this front plate, I've had to tell so many people this. We even made a video about it. This front plate can be rotated so that you can do 4-hole pattern or a 3-hole pattern on your diff mounts. Just extra threaded holes behind here. Can you see this, Jack? Yeah, there's extra threaded holes in behind this plate. So if you do go with one of these and you're wondering why something doesn't fit, you just need to rotate this plate. That's all I got. We'll see you guys in the next one.